Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, April 10th. We'll call to order at 6:34 p.m. First item of business is second read on surplus equipment request for the Recreation Department. Any questions or concerns?
Still have no concerns.
I
The
have no
value,
concerns.
I think the highest value on any of those was $200.
Yep.
Again, same thing. I think we should just put it out to, once we finally surplus it, offer it up, maybe in the around town or on the website for residents.
Yep. Put in a silent auction and say,
Put a
silent
silent
bid kinda,
auction,
and
give a
then off
date,
it goes.
and
Yep.
highest bid takes it.
Okay. Makes sense. Review of the water main break on River Road procurement. Pete, come on up. So continuing our discussion from last time, I believe you have a spitball estimate on what that might cost to replace the whole River Road section? Or something, ballpark.
Yes, I asked for an estimate about a quarter-mile length section, and it would be about 300 to 400,000.
And that's just, what, rip up the sidewalk, put it in, replace sidewalk?
Yep. That's just a ballpark. And it would depend if we had the supply on hand or whatever, and I said probably not. And that would also be, because it's hard to get ductile iron now, so that would be with the plastic.
So 3 to 4 is without having the supplies?
Correct.
Okay. And you said a quarter mile?
That was the estimate I gave them for the distance. That would be the whole lower flat part, probably, just eyeballing it.
Okay. Questions?
Is
mean, it's-
quarter mile the whole road or just a
No.
portion?
No, it's just the area that has had all the problems with the bad backfill. I believe that's what's causing the problem, the rocks and stuff getting up against the ductile iron and causing cracks when the ground shifts and the pipe flexes a little. So, I estimated about a quarter mile.
Yeah, so that road starts to incline not far beyond where the last break
Correct.
happened. Were
Correct.
you thinking right around that part or at the top where it starts to, at the crest of the hill? I'm just curious so I can eyeball it myself.
I was told years ago, there was one right before it started to go uphill. And then there was been the two that we had in the flat section, and
Yeah.
right near where we just had this one, I guess there was one.
Okay, so really it's just been
That lower,
from that lower bend,
Correct.
starting there and going to the last house, basically.
right.
Okay,
And that's where I came up with a quarter mile.
all right.
So when's the last time we had a camera in that whole line?
You don't camera it. So it's
Can't
drinking
camera that
water.
line?
No, not really, no.
Probably only if we drain the water system. I don't know if they do it in the high.
You'd have to drain it. I honestly believe that the ductile iron, like the pieces that broke, they weren't really compromised. It was just cracked from the bad backfill, I believe, and the ground shifting. Because the walls and the thickness of it is still,
Still plenty there.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we got some pictures of the backfill. I mean, there's huge chunks of concrete, not concrete, blacktop. You know, there's boulders in there like this up against the pipe. Big no-no.
Today.
Today, yes. I don't know why I'd do it back then neither, but, or anybody would.
All right, well, at least it's a ballpark to, for
It's
capital
something.
to think about in the future to add it to the potential.
Yep.
Well, if we're doing River Road at some point. then-
Right.
They're scheduled, Glenn informed me, Wednesday to do the paving.
Okay.
To re-blacktop the gentleman's driveway and the one from the last break where the concrete is. So that'll be Wednesday if all goes well.
All right.
Okay. I thought you were going to tell me when Glenn was scheduling that road. It's like,
That's what I thought
I
at
didn't think
first,
we're there
too.
yet.
Wow,
Nope,
that's
nope.
impressive.
Right?
Okay.
And that line goes, I know we talked about West High where it connects and stuff, but it goes all the way to Pratt, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So I'm guessing if we did the whole section, it's probably 3 times that. It's probably close to 3/4 mile.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
yeah, probably.
So
If you're going to the bend.
you're probably
Good half.
1.5, 2. You're probably at 2. Just, who knows? Probably at 2.
Because if we're not doing the road for a couple of years, then guaranteed
easily.
that's quite a bit higher.
Plus
as,
the
as
road.
the years go on.
Correct. Yeah,
Plus the road, plus the drainage, plus the
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
$20,000 repairs don't sound so bad
No.
for
No.
now.
Just inconvenience.
Yep.
Short inconvenience. So DCAM did approve our emergency procurement authorization for the advertising requirements. So that's been approved. And we can waive the competitive procurement process if we so wish. We did actually reach out to 2 vendors the day of the break, but only one was available to do services. And then we obviously reached out to a paving contractor that we've used for the paving work next week, so, or this week. So currently, that all in is expected not to exceed 12,500 for the outside services. Obviously, there was the in-kind, all the work that we did internally.
Yeah, I've got the memo here. I mean, I don't have any concerns with it. They've approved it. Are you ready for a motion?
I am, unless there's other questions.
Make a motion to waive the competitive procurement requirement for the emergency repair work for the River Road water main emergency repair work, and to engage Johnson Asphalt Paving LLC to not exceed $12,500 and authorize Brian Smith to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next part of it is the funding for that work. So we could come back to it a little later in the fiscal year and see where we're at, and if your budget has that capacity, because I don't think you've had any other breaks this year or any other kind of emergency type things.
No, we haven't.
So we can do that, or we could request a reserve fund transfer just to kind of to cover it. It is an emergency
Right.
from the finance committee, so I don't know.
Being this close to the end of the year, I would suggest just waiting and seeing.
Okay.
We're a couple months away from, closing out the fiscal year and figuring out where we're at. We might have that in a line item.
And then we can do a reserve fund if we need to towards the end.
Right.
Okay. Works for me.
All right.
Anything else, Pete?
No, the mission's been up and running. I mentioned that to you, and everything is great.
Excellent.
That's what we were hoping for.
Great.
It's
Great on
It's a
Monday.
really, really nice system.
Good.
So, yeah.
Good. Sounds like an investment well worth it. Well, like I said, I think we talked about, we'll just try to keep track of kind of maybe, you can get a report of the false alarm, what we now know are false alarms versus the valid ones as you go along.
I have to
Keep
see.
record of it.
Right, I have to see if there's a way, so right now, so they don't get the false alarms, it doesn't call whoever's on that week, we silence the alarm. But I gotta look and see, like on the next windy day, because that's when we have all of them, see if it shows it on the screen. It may just show it on the screen, we can keep track of it, and it doesn't do the call out.
Okay, it doesn't log them?
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay, so that's what I was
But
thinking. You
I'm
just
not
get a
sure
log.
if it has to make the call to put it in the log.
Oh.
If it has to dial it out, I'll have to
gotcha.
look into that and see.
I would hope not. But yeah, if,
Yeah.
if we can, it'd be nice to just take
Right.
a look at it after a quarter or, a couple
Yep.
times. See the difference and kind of confirm that payback.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think we'll see it,
Excellent.
so, oh, yeah.
Any
Okay.
questions, anything for Pete?
Nope, none.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion of the recommendation to change dental insurance providers to Delta Dental.
This is one that we had discussed a while ago, as we were working on other policy stuff. This came up. So the letter here indicates that there's no concerns by any of the members of the IAC that met,
Correct.
and they're ready for us to move forward with it.
Yep. Yeah, because we had to give notice that we were going to consider it, and we
Yep.
did a little while back, so. Any questions or concerns?
I have no concerns.
I don't either.
Make a motion to engage Delta Dental as the town's dental insurance plan, beginning with insurance year 2024, which starts on July 1, 2023, and authorize Jennifer Eichhorn, treasurer, to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I think the rest of our business, I could do some updates, but makes more sense to hold off and do it in a joint meeting, so anything else for that? All right. We will, I move we take a recess until 7 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resume and call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee to order at 7:02 PM. And first item will be review and finalize the FY24 budget. And so just walk through a couple things from where we were last week to where we are tonight.
Jake, microphone, please.
Is that better? For those that didn't hear, we resumed and called the joint meeting to order at 7:03 PM. And first item of business is the FY24 review and finalize budget. And I'm just going to walk through some of the differences between our summary sheet here today and from last week for the group. We have adjusted the education line based on the changes made at the last school committee meeting, which is an overall reduction. And then we adjusted the library construction repayment to stabilization from the 150, 125 split to 120, 123 split to 145, 128 to propose as a way to get to balanced, because we were still just about 4,000
Right.
negative. So knowing that was our split item, just as a proposed way to get to zero, or to the positive. The wages are still held there. We still have the free cash hold for potential additional school fund this year. And I believe that is the only changes we have in here. So that brings our raise and appropriate funding versus expenditures down to a positive $1,615, and it leaves a balance after the hold for the school of free cash of $222,551. Any thoughts about the $5,000 change, just shifting the repayment by $5,000 just to get the balancing?
No.
No.
No concern.
General questions, concerns about this from the group, the way it's set up right now?
It's the smallest balance I've seen in 1,615.
We had more than that left on the table after an STM last year.
Yep.
I know we talked about the 60,000 for wage adjustments for the town as the other kind of non-finalized item for tonight, just to go through. We've drafted the ATM with the article to hold that for future allocation once we've come to decision on our wage adjustments for FY24. But again, back to whether that number is the right number, and if it's not, how do we get something different? Still an open question for the group.
I mean, given the fact that there's 1615 left over and raise and appropriate, I'd say leave the 60 there. Just quick numbers, you're a little over 2% is what we would have, across the board. 1% for general government and non or affected, personnel on a base wage is like 21,000 and change per 1%.
Right.
So 2 point something, 2 point 2.5, 2 point, I don't know, and to leave a little balance there, it might leave 3, 4, 5,000 at the end. But it's about as balanced as you'll get it.
And I believe that was similar to $1. Isn't that what we figured out last time? A flat $1 was about the same as
Correct.
almost 3%,
Right, and so,
whatever the group decides.
So is it still up for discussion then at a later date? Whether you go with the $1 or the X% or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, we can discuss further tonight, but I don't know that we
I
come
just
to a
see
decision. I don't think we'll come to a decision tonight, and even if we do, I don't think we have time to incorporate it into the ATM, so it'll still be a separate article for now, but definitely.
this just sets the ceiling on what we can work within, and we can't go over that, because there's not any other room to raise and appropriate anywhere else anyways. And like I had mentioned at the last meeting, we still are waiting and hoping to get more information. There was, on the wage study, and we had numerous towns that we requested, one town declined totally, but within that, the difficulty we had related to fire, and the trying to get all of those broken down, because there's fire districts as opposed to fire personnel that fall under the town appropriation. Fire districts raise money on their own, so like Montague will do a fire district and you get 2 tax bills. Town sets their tax bill, and then a second one shows up from the fire district and says, we're also going to charge you. So it's hard to, they don't work under the same constraints. So we're trying to compare apples and oranges and see if we can come to an agreement on where we need to be. But this sets the limit, at least for FY24, of where we can go. So, and as Jake said, even if we came to an agreement now, there's not enough time to modify the ATM, bring it back, meet on it again, vote on it, and then get it out to the residents in time. So I think moving forward, we'll leave it. I think you said 3 years ago this was done,
Approximately,
roughly.
yeah.
And then between now and June 30th, we'll continue that conversation about the wage tables, come to a consensus, vote on it, put the change that fits within this budget. Whether that's a flat rate, whether that's a step changes, a base wage adjustment known as COLAs, there's different options.
Well, from the chair I'm sitting in, I'm glad that there's at least a reasonable process taking place to determine what the town can afford and what is as fair as we can be to the employees. I mean, every coin has 2 sides. The taxpayers don't want to pay more than they need to, but you also want to, pay the employees some reasonable amount with inflation what it is. So, a process to get that balance. Thank you for putting it in place, so we're not just throwing it at a dartboard or something. Should make everybody a little more comfortable. We may not be satisfied with the result all around, but at least we're following a good process, I think.
Yeah, the fear without having a number is that we go to that process and we don't have a number, and then we make some agreement that we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're well over that. That doesn't make any sense, and then we can't authorize it. So we had to make sure that we had a number to work with.
Right. Anything else anyone wants for further discussion or wants to have about options tonight around the wages?
I didn't have enough time. I had mentioned, I would like to see some, between now and the time we set it, I'd like to look at all 3 of those options and see how they play out within those parameters that we've set for the dollar amount. I'd like to see what step changes look like. I'd like to see what a flat rate does based on FY24 steps, and how those play out within this budget.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? I have some really rough cut on that, Scott, if you did want to talk about it.
Sure, if you have,
This is probably slightly overstated because I was coming out with about 2.4 total compensation, which we know it's more like 2.1 because it's 21 for $1. So our total salary budget is more like
Oh, okay.
2.1 versus 2.4 in my math, just because everything's 40 hours and everything's
oh, okay, yeah,
full.
we have a handful of part-time.
We have a
Okay.
handful of part-time that's
All
not, so it's a little overstated, but a 0.25% change. So if we took our steps and changed from a 2% separation, step 1, step 2, step 3, to 2.25%, the cost would be probably around $30,000 to $35,000, based on the affected employees that exist in their steps in FY24.
And
We'll
that's,
take questions from the public when we're done with discussion up front, just so you know.
and that's without COLA, that's just the step adjustment.
That's just a step adjustment.
With a
It'd
zero.
be in the 30 to 35 for a 0.25% increase. If we went to 2.5 between steps, it'd be between like 65 and 70,000.
Which is unattainable.
I mean, you're close to doubling it.
Yeah.
I mean, 2.75. I mean, I know. I think myself even had mentioned, kind of thinking about where the school is in their tables and seeing if we can't move closer to that with the town's tables. We can't even get to 2.5. There's no way we're close to 3
Yeah.
with the budgets we have
Yeah.
right now. So it's quite a gap, unfortunately, that we can't close. Right? It doesn't look like we can do much. We'd probably be hard to do 1% and a quarter in the steps with the budget. Be about all there is.
We'd be $3,000-4,000
both.
short probably,
I don't know which way, but yeah, it'd
Yeah,
be close.
Yeah, because the 30 to 35 is a rough estimate, so it might fall right in line.
Right. And 3 for reference is 140,000 probably by itself. Just getting to 3% between steps. So. And that's no COLA. Again, they're extremely rough numbers, but it's just to give us directionally what that change is, because it's
Right.
not, it's not a 0.25% of salary.
You said 3% was how much again?
3, it's in the 140,000 range to go from 2 to 3. And every year that will go up theoretically if we have the same employee base as today.
Right.
And we can get more, I guess at this point I'll ask the question, other than the 2.25, do we want a more detailed, more accurate 2.25 just to have for next time we discuss the wages?
I think for reference, I'd like to see it,
Okay.
just, because it gives us perspective on the change in steps versus the flat rate versus a % increase on base wage. So at least we can have all 3 of those and look at what the options are.
And just for my notes, you want more than 2.25 or just that because
No,
we
it's
couldn't do any
unattainable.
more anyway right
It's
now?
unattainable.
Okay. Anything else the Finance Committee or the board would like to have for the next wage discussion for data?
Are you gentlemen satisfied with what you have for data for this so far?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know where else we would draw more money from within this budget. It's just, and I understand that the 0.25% will move upward as you go along, so whoever the employee might be will get more as they go along, which is good. Good for the employees. You have to treat your employees well, I think, and it's disappointing we got 1% left, but the other side of that coin, taxpayers are paying the bill, and things are not great for all the taxpayers either. So, tough.
So just for clarity, the 1/4%, changing the tables, it does, it swings the shift of increases are heavier on the higher steps. So that's where it chews up, a 1/4% on the steps chews up approximately 2% of COLA if it were flat COLA to everybody. And that's what I want for perspective, because somebody had thrown it out there, well, maybe we could increase the amount they get each step, but you can't retro pull down the step one. You have to have, your starting point is always step one, and you have to go up from there. So you can't regressively, take money away from employees. So you have to build it up, and the only way to do that is it exponentially gets bigger. End of the road, and so we have to take into consideration, if that's one we're looking at, what does that mean when our bulk of our current staff is around step 6 and 7, 8, 9, they're in that mid-range. 5 to 8 years from now, when they're maxed out, are we going to have any capacity if we were to make that change? And so we'd have to project out, several years to find out if we did that now, are we handcuffing ourselves 5 to 7 years from now that we can't even come close to funding that? So those are the numbers that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah. Well, as you all know, I've kind of been in favor of a dollar amount when somebody walks in to buy a gallon of milk. If they walk in with 50 cents more in their hand, it doesn't matter if they're making $150,000 or they're making $30,000. It goes the same amount to buying that gallon of milk. And that's one way to look at it. How you decide, I don't know, but you make a good point, Scott. I mean, further out, the percentages go up and up and up, and what do you do? Thank you.
And I was going to say, on the other hand, if we're not changing the amount of steps, so the steps are just guaranteed COLA, that if we do nothing, there's a guaranteed COLA for the large majority. And we have one staff member that's maxed out. We have another staff member this will be their final step and they'll be maxed out. Other than that, most of the townwide employees have at minimum 5 years before they'd reach it, if not 7 or 8 years. So the other alternative, if we're not changing the amount of percentage each step is, it's looking at, without doing a COLA, another option would be, say, drop step 1, add a new step 16, and then renumber everything. And people stay where they're at. They don't lose a step, but it does the same net result, that you're keeping your incoming wages interesting enough that people want to apply. So even if we couldn't do a COLA per se in any given year, we've always said you want to make sure that your step 1 is attractive enough for new employees, and your top step is attractive enough to keep your employees here. And sometimes a COLA is not attainable, and you might have to look at it conversely. How do we make this attainable without actually adding money today above and beyond the step? And that's just another way of looking at it. Of course, it again rolls on a future cost. The new step 15, which is just 2% higher than what the last one is, and goes from there.
Well, you shift the top and the bottom, 2%,
Yeah.
but nothing in between. So it affects anybody you hire that year and anybody who was already maxed out, and
Correct.
that's it.
And everybody else moves accordingly. Your steps become 2 through 16 instead of 1 through 15.
Right. And at least if no COLA, those who are maxed out get something.
Correct.
Anything else on the wage piece for tonight? Okay, we did want to just add one more thing. It was a real rough cut, as you know. Just a really quick and dirty 40 hours for all employees at the, eligible employees at the rate they're at, and projected one step higher for next year. The, built-in average overtime or required overtime in different departments and things like that, which will scale even higher when you add, between steps, that was not in there. So again, those numbers are just pretty rough, but they
Okay.
just gave us some direction on what does it look like. So 34 could be 30, it could be 40, but just gives you some, so we'll get that context for next time and a more accurate on the 2 1/4. Questions from the audience? If you'd come up to the table and state your name, please, and
Questions about the wage scale or just in general?
about the FY24 budget.
Okay.
Please, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, and thanks for your patience when I was raising my hand. I wasn't sure. I thought I heard you say, we're going to vote on it. I'm like, wait a minute. So I appreciate that.
No worries.
All right, my name is Mark Burnett, and I have some comments and some questions about the FY24 budget, specifically related to the elementary school. First, though, I want to thank everybody up here from the Select Board and the Finance Committee for giving, 4 months now, working on the budget. I believe early December, so for anybody that's watching at home, and I think there are some new folks checking it out, all of you folks have put in a lot of time, and I appreciate that, and I think others do as well. So thank you for that. I'm speaking here tonight as a spokesman for the community, because many distressed members in town have spoken to me about their worries for the school and their concerns of not being heard. And I'm also speaking from the perspective as an educator and as a town assessor. As you've held your budget meetings, you heard from department heads briefly summarize their budgets for the coming year. The size of the budget increase tends to be the main focus. After reviewing this, you ask for cost drivers. What is increasing each department's budget? I think I have that correct. That's the process. I believe you've been informed that the school had an unprecedented budget increase due primarily to some students' needs that were more than Erving Elementary could accommodate. Can I just ask clarifying, are you aware of that that is the major driver of the elementary budget? A few students that are being out of district placed?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
My apologies for not knowing that. Thank you. They are now receiving services out of district that they need and lawfully deserve. Unfortunately, that cost is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the school has no control over that. It is the law. Yet, with this knowledge, we're disappointed that you've still asked the school committee to cut its budget over and over to the point where the school cannot correctly run its department. The children of this town are the ones paying the price for this. What you may not be aware of is that in the last few years, the school has lost many positions that have just not been filled. So this is prior to this year. I'll let you know a lot of the positions that just are gone. There's been a 100% reduction in the early childhood administrator. That position was not replaced. A 100% reduction in our behaviorist director. Position was not replaced. 100% reduction in the behaviorist assistants. 2 positions not replaced. Currently, 30% of the classrooms are not supported with classroom paraprofessionals, as they have not been replaced or they have been moved. We have currently 3 one-to-one paraprofessionals who work individually with students all day long. There has been a 100% cut to a part-time custodian. It's about a 12-hour-a-week position. Has not been replaced. As I mentioned, we have a massive increase in out-of-district placement for students. We have an 80% decrease in substitute availability. We literally only have 1 substitute teacher that comes in. Thankfully, she is a former educator at the school. Where we used to have 5 or 6, we have 1. For instance, today there were, 7 or 8 absences on the board, and there were not enough people to fill them. We pulled paraprofessionals from one class to cover another, to cover another, to cover another. All of that has already happened. Now, with this year's budget, there are more cuts, and these are the current cuts that are going to happen. A 20% reduction in classroom teachers. So we have 2 preschool teachers that will no longer return, and this is a loss of 2 out of 10 of our classroom teachers. There's a 50% cut in math interventionists. 2 positions are 2 part-time positions will no longer be available. There is a 20% reduction for 2 education specialists positions. There's a 20% reduction for our technology director. Significant cuts to assistive technology and student resources, along with many other areas, have been cut as well. Besides these major staffing cuts, students being home for a year and a half during the pandemic has created levels of trauma this school has never seen before. Students have missed incredibly influential years of learning how to appropriately interact with peers and adults. The majority of students' academic progress has been halted or even reverted. But most importantly, there has been a major uptick in student emotional and behavioral dysregulation. This is not only in Erving. This is, of course, across the country because of the pandemic. But, I'm here talking about what's happening here. Here's a brief background of just some of the student needs. Where students were previously allowed to go to the bathroom unaccompanied by teachers, they no longer are. Where students used to use appropriate language and communication skills that were age appropriate and acceptable, they no longer are, a distinct amount of them. Where students were able to handle trauma and difficult situations, more and more are experiencing emotional breakdowns, requiring staff with a certified skill set to intervene. The extreme losses in staff, plus the unprecedented trauma and lack of basic student and communication skills students are exhibiting equal just one thing. We have a crisis at Erving Elementary, and it is getting worse, and more staff are being cut, and it is only going to make it even more difficult. We do have one small glimmer of hope, and that was the hiring of a talented adjustment counselor to have counseling sessions with students, but she's often not able to service those students that she is supposed to on her caseload because of frequent emergencies that arise. And unfortunately, she is paid through federal COVID emergency funds, and her position will join the list of cuts after next year. She will be gone, leaving even fewer resources for children in need. There are ways to make this happen and give this school the funding it needs to teach our children. I've been attending annual town meetings since the 1990s. For 30 years, I have seen Erving voters fully fund the school budget to the point where just a few years ago, outside under the tent, during the first COVID year, voters asked, what else can we do? Can we give you more money? It was really astonishing. And at the time, the reply from the school was, thank you very much, but we were okay. And we were at the time. The school is not okay now. Now is the time that this school and this town need leadership. Please remember those voters who always voted for those school budgets, who for endless years have supported the school, are the people that you folks represent. I know I have given you a lot of information tonight. What I have shared is not opinion or conjecture, but just facts. In closing, I'm asking you, actually begging you, to do what is right for our children and fully fund the school's original budget request for next year. And I ask you to help us fix this. Thank you. Happy to have conversation.
Thank you. That was a lot to digest in a moment, but any questions on what was said or clarifying? Anything that anyone would like to clarify?
So I just want to, I will engage in the conversation you asked for that. So I would ask, what are your proposals to offset that increase?
Sure. It appears, especially from just listening a few minutes ago, you're down to like $1,000.
$1,600.
$1,600. And I can appreciate the diligence that you folks have put into this. It's not easy, but we are talking about 11 staff members that have been cut throughout the last few years. My proposal, if we can't do anything internally with this budget process, is to which only the Board of Selectmen can do, Select Board, is to do a Proposition 2.5 override. Because at town meeting, there is going to be an amendment to fully fund the school, and we're going to have to figure it out either then or maybe ahead of time and plan for that override.
Thank you.
An override's going to mean a permanent tax increase to the community.
Sure. Each year, the levy limit does increase, no doubt about that. And this would increase another, I think it's $332,000 that was cut from the budget. It's about 10% of the budget, maybe a little less than that. Yes. And we still need even more than that, actually, because of all those other staff positions that are gone. This budget that was presented this year doesn't even include those previous 9 that were gone.
So how do we, moving forward, fix a school budget that's $5.5 million?
The school budget currently is 3.7 million, so I'm not sure.
Education.
Yeah, well, I don't know what I'm talking about the elementary school budget.
Right. Yeah, the 5.5 includes secondary and tech. So it's
Which, I think you're given what those amounts
It's
are.
just
You
an
have
assessment and
no
that's
control
it.
over it.
Right.
So I can't speak to,
other than a
frankly,
seat at the
tech.
table by a member of the committee. At the
That
tech
doesn't
level.
have a voting,
At tech they do, but at
Tech, yeah.
at tech, right,
at secondary they do not. No.
for sure.
But, I mean, this isn't historical, but for reference, those two this year are a net decrease of 20,000 or 5,000 or something, so they're pretty level funded year over year, so I think really from a escalating cost standpoint, at least in the current situation, it's primarily all coming out of elementary, which we know is primarily placement. I
Yeah.
don't dispute that.
I appreciate that you recognize that. It is, it's tough. We do have some students, a very small amount, that need these services and, like I said, are legally required. But unfortunately, because of that, we have all this other loss going on. And with the culture, I guess I could say, of students, coming back to learn how to be students, it's very, very difficult. When I did crunch a few numbers, looked at a few things from an assessor's point of view, with an override, increasing the budget by this $332,000, that would work out to be about a 22-cent increase for every $1,000 of valuation. An amount that I think the townspeople would be happily cover, or a majority of them anyway.
Is that a flat rate?
No,
is that
that is
shifted?
for residential, of the approximately 750 residential payers. Now, knowing that that's not an exact science, I'm sure you folks have, talked to our assessor's clerk about that. There's a lot of moving things, but that was the best estimate we could come up with.
Okay, but is that MRF shifted or no?
Yes.
It is, okay, thank you.
Full shift 65.
65. Mm-hmm.
So one of my concerns with, I think there's a fundamental issue with the budgeting in town for all departments. I think, I mentioned something, I was reminded by another elected official the other day that about 5 years ago I said, be careful, we're going to be in this spot in a few years that we're going to outspend our levy limit. And so we're here 5 years later, outspending our levy limit or just about, within $1,600. The increase that you ask on a Prop 2.5 override is instead of 2.5%, it would be roughly 5.5%. It's an additional 3% because our 2.5% levy limit is 301,000. Sorry, my eyes aren't that great. 934. So just shy of $302,000 is 2.5%, and it only took a few years to hit that ceiling again. And we haven't really wrangled in how to stop our budgets from exponentially growing. So my fear is we do the Band-Aid of an override this year, and that's great, we fund it. And then 3, 4, 5 years, we're back at this table saying, well, we ran out of money again, let's do another 2.5 override. And this can get, it gets a little dicey, you know, and I'm not sure that's the, and I hear you. And for the immediate fix, it works. It absolutely works. I'm not sure if long-term that works.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on that to respond. I think it is more than a Band-Aid. I think a Band-Aid would be pulling money out of stabilization free cash. That would be a Band-Aid because it doesn't increase the budget for next year. Doing this Prop 2.5 override would automatically set that up for next year. Then maybe some areas can be adjusted. Maybe we could get a behaviorist back in our school and an actual program there. I've advocated at the school board for, school committee, for getting, a life skills program back at the school that had historically been there, so that we're not paying upwards of $400,000 to transport and educate students elsewhere. But that's going to take some time to build up and get the expertise, and we've got to get folks in administration and at the school committee to want to do that. A lot of staff members feel like that's the way to go. Doesn't mean we're experts or it's the right thing, but certainly money-wise, that could certainly help out. So I wanted to reply to a couple of your comments. So I think it is more than a Band-Aid. I think it is much more of a permanent fix. And I hear you about we are at the levy limit for sure, but just educationally for folks watching at home and folks that are here, the town of Erving raises and appropriates about $12 million. We have a levy ceiling capacity of double that. Do we want to tax folks and have a budget of $24 million? No, but we do have that massive excess that we could dip into, and I am only talking about $300,000, not an extra $12 million. And because of our very beneficial tax situation, with 90% of our taxes being paid by commercial industrial property holders, owners, really only 10% of that increase falls to the approximately 750 residential payers. And like I said, it would be about 22 cents per $1,000 of evaluation. So like $22 for every $100,000 your home is valued at.
Other questions or comments for Mark?
No, just a comment, other than there's a process for a 2.5, and not having posted any conversation about a 2.5 override, to present an unbalanced budget this evening with the understanding that we're going to is disingenuous to, to anybody that was looking at the agenda saying they're just going to discuss the budget that's in front of them. So I don't think we can do a vote on anything like that, that we're going to move forward with that this evening.
Yeah.
It was not posted as a discussion, and we would have to put that on there as one of the alternatives, I would think, because that's a pretty substantial conversation piece.
It is, and fortunately, it's a month away or whatever.
Yep.
You haven't officially set the date. What, May 10th is maybe
May
the
10th.
tentative.
Yep.
Yeah, and certainly I would have come here sooner, but the school committee met just last week to finalize that, and I was. We were trying to go through the procedure and do things correctly, much like waiting in back there, raising our hands at the appropriate time. So we were trying to, do that correctly, or we would have come here earlier. And again, I'm speaking for the community, not for Erving Teachers Association, not for Erving Elementary School. Really, it's for a bunch of these parents back here who have reached out to me.
I know we have the one big cost year over year for 24, but when I look back at the 3 years prior, I mean, the total increase for the whole 3 years was only $150,000. And
The
we
3 years
had
prior to this year?
to 24.
To
So
24.
20,
yeah.
FY 20, from FY 20, 21, 22, 23, those 3 years. So yes, COVID, then back to school, hybrid, and then more back to school, and then now, and then
Right.
looking at next year, right?
Right.
Which is similar to this year, I would expect, save for the unexpected costs, special ed costs.
Yeah,
But
those were massive,
I-
and of course, the inflation costs of utilities that Dan has spoken about at a few of these meetings. I mean, the oil is, I think we're burning something like 500 gallons a week, or like something crazy. Like, and by the way, the heat hasn't been fixed, Scott, from the last time I talked about that at school committee. But anyway, yeah. I think it's, to answer your question, I don't see that that's an ongoing thing. I think we know that the major drivers were out of district and then those significant utility increases.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not presuming or that they're exactly apples to apples, but I'm curious if you have an opinion. When we look at other elementary schools and, cost per student for similar populations, similar sized towns, slightly, either equivalent or better, standardized testing, regardless of your opinion of that, I'm not a huge fan, but ours are significantly more, like thousands more per student, before we deal with the fact that we have a placement this year.
Right.
And I don't know if you have any opinion on how are they managing to provide a level of education that everyone's concerned that we cannot do with a budget that's much higher.
I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but I can tell you I taught for 15 years in another local district, and I came here and took a pay cut to come to a much better school. I was so thankful that my 3 children went here and were not in the district that I worked in. In that district, they went without specials for 3 years, no art, no music, no PE, nothing. It was... I don't know what to tell you. I can only speak of the 2 places that I've worked, and Erving was far and away better, and I think our kids here deserve that. We could have that. No, actually, I think the school committee and the administration should be the ones to defend that and support that. But if they can't, then I'll try to look into that as well.
That's fair. I was even comparing to schools in our union.
Within
so,
the- yeah.
within
Well,
the
you-
union, so not probably, I don't know where you've worked, but probably not some of the ones you're referencing.
No, and let's keep in mind, a lot of times when we talk about our union, really the only thing about the union that is shared, we just share administration, we share a superintendent. Besides that, they are very different, and there's nothing else that is the same. It's not like, in Greenfield, they have many, many, many schools all under one superintendent. Everything is the same. What is shared here is just an administrator to keep costs down. So the comparison of Leverett or Wendell, New Salem to Erving is very different.
I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and that's not exactly the focus here. So
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate, just that perspective is also stuff that is set out there, and why do we spend, as Erving, spend more per child, so, and that's not necessarily a sentiment that we don't want to do it. It's just a question that it's often asked too. So,
Yeah.
not expecting you to have the answer. I was just curious if you had one.
No,
An opinion,
and I'm
that's
not
all.
here about gotcha questions either, and I appreciate the back and forth. I'd have to look into that some more.
Fair. I think, just from, it's a good opportunity, and I'll just check with our broadcast. Do we have the principal? Did she join remote? No, okay. She was going to try to. She had another meeting that was getting out a little after 7, so to your comment, I can ask the question of the administration too. Are you?
So, you got to ask her to defend the cost of the
No, I'm just
per-school
asking if
student
you
cost.
had an opinion. You said administration. So,
Shouldn't be me.
Mackenzie, are you have something to add as a school committee, or
Nope, I'm
Then-
just asking, is it possible to raise the volume? We're having a hard time.
Oh,
hearing
great.
back there.
oh, okay, yes,
Said a lot of good stuff.
Especially the FinCom
We'll have to do a combination of using the mics with the speakers and just projecting better.
Thank you.
Okay, so, let's see.
Not even to put her on the spot, just to bring her into the conversation. So,
Sure.
because then she may be available. So,
Yeah, so I don't have video, but it does say connected with partner.
okay.
So I guess if you want to ask if anyone is on the line.
Is anyone on the line, Lisa? Can you hear us? If you are there. We'll go ahead and continue on, and then if she's able to join, that's great.
Oh, no, okay. Definitely is here. Give me another minute.
Okay.
The beauty of technology.
Oh, I'm there. I lost
That's all right. We'll continue discussion just to let that him work on that. That
Oh, there she is.
covered.
I can see her.
We can. Hi, Lisa. Can you hear us? We can't hear you yet, but we can see you. That may be on our end.
Oh,
Do you need to turn up the TV on this?
yeah, that I do.
Just be aware, I know you turned it up back there. If we start getting echo, if it's too loud, so if you hear that, if you could. Make you sit in the hot seat for much longer, Mark. Anything
Oh, it's
else
fine.
for Mark while he's up here before we move on to our next question or comment? No?
And
Good? Okay.
I just have one other question before I thank you for your time. And without getting into a really big discussion, because I'm sure you're going to be talking about this at another time, but it's my understanding that you're looking to potentially demolish parts of the IP mill. And I think, what I've heard, so I just want to get clarification, that you're maybe looking to do that for this year and possibly, probably not a 2.5 override, but like a debt exclusion or capital exclusion kind of thing. Is that something that's on the table?
Yes, there's a public information session on
24th?
April 24th, yep. Kind of in lieu or in the midst of our regular meeting times to kind of present where we're at and where the capital planning committee, the finance committee, and the select board have come to at this point with the situation with the IP mill.
Sure.
And the recommendation from the group has been that at this point, through RFPs and other things that we've tried to do, unless housing was a way that we wanted to go as a community in that location, it's pretty much at the point where the liability costs and potentials, we really need to tear it down, is kind of what we're recommending. And that's been discussed multiple times, so nothing that hasn't come up here. And then how do we get there? Because that's expensive. And
For
so,
sure.
We're talking millions, obviously. And so we're going to have 6 scenarios that we think are the viable ways to present this and do it and see what the public input is on the 24th. And then, obviously, depending on the outcome of that, right, it's not exactly a straw poll, but it'll give us directionally what people are thinking.
Sure.
That may end up on a June special for discussion as an option to do or not do.
Okay, well, I'll certainly be there, and clearly I don't know everything that's going on yet, but I would say perfunctory with basic information. I think spending, doing an override for $332,000 to improve the education of the students in this town is much more important than spending over $1 million to tear down a building that has sat vacant for 20 years. Granted, I said, we'll have to learn more, but I think it's a better use of money. I think there's a, priority list. Quite frankly, I think bridges are more important than an old mill building. Another discussion for another time, but I think that's it, unless you guys have anything else for me.
I'll welcome your input on the 24th on all of
Yeah.
that. And those things, the offerings that we're talking about are finite increases. They're not permanent, where this would be in terms of
That's true.
an override for the school budget or the budget in general.
Yep.
These are either a 1 year or a 3 to 5 year limited override. So just perspective for everyone listening. But I welcome everyone to come on the 24th and hear more about that. And the two, well, I understand where you're drawing them together because they're similar efforts in terms of the process. The purpose is, they're completely don't affect each other and unrelated in that way. So,
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you for your time and the polite back and forth. As I mentioned to others, you guys have always been agreeable to that, and we don't always agree, but it's always been professional, and you give us the time to be heard. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mark.
thank
All
you
right.
for coming.
Take care.
So I know there were other hands up. Apologies, I don't know exactly what order. And I see one up right now in the front. It's
Mark?
Mark, yeah. All right, Mark, if you come up.
To say it real quick from here, one of the things I see happening is, in addition to other losses of income, is some students are getting choiced out by their parents because of loss of service in the school, and that means a loss in some of our state aid, doesn't it? Also, I think we also will lose additional staff and maybe even some families who came here for the schools and who now don't believe in our school, will leave. And I think it sort of cascades downhill from here unless we find a way to stop that. There's been too many losses.
I don't know the. I don't know the answer to your first question. I don't know if anyone on the school committee, and I don't think we have. We may have Lisa on now. Okay,
Can you hear me? I'm
we
for
can.
30 minutes.
We can hear you now. So.
Okay, now you can, okay, good.
There was a question around, or there was a comment around school choicing and whether that reduced our state aid if we have students that choice out. And I don't know if you know that answer or if anyone on the school committee who's here tonight would know that answer.
I can speak to that a little bit. It depending upon who choice out our free and reduced status, that does impact some of our grant funding that we get, Title IV, Title I, Title IIA. And then we're also losing paying the per pupil capital to the school where they used it.
Could you repeat that last part? You're kind of cutting out a little bit, in and out a little bit, and I missed the about the choice about the school they're choicing out to.
The school, the student choices out. That school receives the revenue from Erving, the town of Erving, the per pupil capital expense per student.
Do we know what that is?
I apologize.
Yes.
It's about $5,500 that the town would have to pay to the sending school. And it doesn't increase if you have a special education student, it's still the same. That's why Erving is always deferred to not participate in choice in the past, because the receiving school does not get the actual amount per student. It's a set fee.
So, just to paraphrase, it's approximately $5,500 a student for choicing out that the town of Erving pays to the destination school.
Correct.
And or loses cost, et cetera. So, comparatively to what it costs us to educate a student, that's significant. savings. Obviously, there's a scale and that doesn't make sense in terms of trying to operate a school, but it is much less than we are spending here. I don't know if there was a second question there, Mark. I missed it if there was, but I know there was a comment, so if I didn't answer all your questions, please let me know. Or we didn't get you an answer. Okay. Thank you. Come up to the table, announce your name, and thank you.
My
Thank
name is
you.
Chris Thurston, and I'm a taxpayer. I did not expect any of this. I just have a question about your current statement. I just want to clarify that it's costing us less if we school choice our kids out than it is to have them go to Erving.
The per pupil cost to operate Erving Elementary is, I haven't done the math, but
$26,000,
$28,000 annually per student.
Okay.
And then, so obviously, if our student population goes down, that's going to go up, just by the math. So that's not a positive thing, but versus $5,500.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, come on up. Thank you.
I didn't want to come up. I just wanted to ask also, or actually I'm just here also as a parent at the Erving School to say that I've seen what's happening there. I have a second grader, I have a preschooler. We're not sure what's happening with preschool next year. I'm very afraid, and my daughter does have an IEP. So we are considering also school choicing out. And it might not be that much money, but we might move, and we did move here for the school. And we've been here for 8 years, and I grew up in Orange, and it has always been known to people in Orange and towns around that Erving is an amazing town to live in. It's an amazing school district. You're lucky if you get to go to the Erving School. And this is why we moved here. So I cannot believe that I moved here for the school, and this is what's happening, and it's really scary. So I stand with the teachers. I hope that the budget can get figured out, because it is scary. The things Mark is saying with COVID and what's happening in every grade, really sad, scary things for students. And so to take other educators away, in my opinion, I think we need to add more in. I mean, we really, it's sad as a mother and a citizen. So I just want to say I'm here in stance of the school and our citizens. And I hope that we can get Erving back to what it's always been to me, even as an out-of-towner, knowing that it's been a great place that I've been happy to move to. And I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thanks for
you.
coming up. Not to get into that, but others who are more knowledgeable about school budget and such can probably confirm. As far as I understand, IEPs cannot be affected, so they are what they are. Just for your reference to that requirement has to stay. So I believe anybody can correct that if it's not true. Next comment or question, come on up.
Hi, Devin Gaudet. I have a bunch of jumbled thoughts, and really I'm going to try to come across as frustrated and not angry. But those two emotions can sometimes really come close to each other. Hearing Mark, he speaks so eloquently, and he really does speak for a lot more people than is what's present here today. He talked about behaviors. He just talked about behaviors in general, that we've seen a lot worse behaviors at the school. And I can vouch for that. The stories I hear my second grader come home with about the language, the swearing, the whole class losing recess or whatever time because the class, there's individuals with behaviors. I think he also mentioned about how kids can't go to the bathroom anymore. I'll tell you, my son, before that privilege was taken away, he would walk into the bathroom and find it covered in urine from kids just urinating all over the place. And then he would feel obligated to clean it up before using it. He's 7. That's not his job, right? But these are behaviors and temporary janitor removed and everything else that goes along with that. It's difficult as a parent to hear that when your son comes home. Yeah, bathroom's covered in urine. So I also have a child who's going to be entering preschool next year, and similar to other people, we heard they're cutting preschool teachers. I haven't heard a plan for what preschool will look like. Are we having preschool? Is it going to be to the same capacity? I filled out the paperwork. We did all that. We said he's going to be there full time. Is there a plan? Do we know of it? You can answer that later. This is still, it can be rhetorical for now. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. I'll offer an answer if you'd like, but go ahead.
Yeah. And then if preschool is increased by 300% in cost, why are we still removing the teachers? Granted, I understand the increase from $5 to $20 will not cover the salary of 2 full-time teachers, but from a parent, I'm seeing price increase significantly and losing preschool teachers. There's no balance there for me. It's either price stays the same or goes away and you lose teachers, or you increase the price and you have a program that's still well respected within the community. And I'm not seeing that right now. And I guess one of the things Mark said is, another question I have then is, how are you basing the school looking successful? I heard you talk about how our price per student is way higher than other schools, but what is the definition of success? Is it having just a lower cost per child? Or what does success look like to you? And that can be answered now.
I will let everyone at the table offer something there. In terms of what we have at our fingertips from, statistical measurement, it's going to be stuff that's put out by, by the state in terms of scores, comparatives, things like that, to the state average, to the local average, to similar sized communities, and those sorts of things. I am by no means a school budget educating, expert. Just looking at some of that data, because obviously it has been an important issue for the community and concerning. Yep. What I have seen in some of those comparisons is that the costs are higher than a lot of the comparable size communities, and I understand that it's a very simple formula. So don't misconstrue that I don't think it's more complicated than that. But higher cost per pupil and lower scores per pupil or equivalent, and so it begs the question that I asked Mark, but it's not for Mark to answer. It was just, it's something that's been on my mind to understand what is different here. I would expect that ours is higher and we provide a better education, and I've lived in the area for a long time too, before living here, and everyone feels that way about Erving Elementary, right? It's sought after. So for me, just as surely on the numbers, how do they keep growing every year? And we are hearing that this is the state, while we are spending more on it every year. And special and extra costs this year or not, it's still going up. And it still wouldn't be potentially within the budget, theoretically, or pretty close to even accommodate what that is. And it doesn't, if I understood correctly, begin to bring us back to where we were a few years ago. So for me, there's a disconnect. Where is this? What's different about the way we're doing it that we can't deliver better for more? That we needed that much more to try to deliver where we were. But there's something missing for me in that, you know, and I think the other piece of this is for the last couple of years, you know, 3 years, I'll say, there's been some discussion about, do you really need this around budget? But there hasn't been a shortage of funding to make it all work, if you will, nor a refusal to fund. So it concerns me when I hear that the state is that we've lost, you know, the level of staffing has gone way down. And yet, you know, what we've funded has not been this discussion. It hasn't been how much money can you cut just to get balanced. So, you know, why is that happening? And we didn't have this conversation 3 years ago or 2 years ago saying we're losing people and we need to keep them. That's concerning. It's not an answer, but you know, those are all things that I'm looking at going, well, how do we keep raising it and not delivering?
Yeah, no, it's fair, and I get it. You look at the numbers, it's a hard fact, it's data, it's a KPI, I understand that, I really do.
It's only one data point, though.
Right, one data point, sure. And I mean, I messaged Jen a couple months ago trying to get the school budget to look at what was their P&L, what did they budget, what did they spend, and it was kind of all over the map for me. It was kind of hard to dive into, and I didn't have time to really take a deep dive over the past couple of years, but I did see budgeted items of 100,000 and spend of only 10, and then I saw items that were budgeted for 20 and spend was 300. So it was kind of all over the map and difficult for a person to really jump into and say, well, why is that so high or why is that so low if we plan the other way? It was difficult to go through. So that's why I don't have a better understanding or a better explanation of why I think the cost per child is so much higher if we've lost 11 staff members. But I would say, for me, a KPI of success, in elementary school at least, is the happiness of my child when he comes home. And it's just not there, you know? He likes school, he likes education, but compared to where it was a couple years ago, you know, the programs that they could have, for reasons for parents to come in or the community to be invited in, it's disappearing. And so there is that disconnect, but yeah, overall happiness and contentment, you know, him going to bed easy because he's not worried about what's going on to other kids, you know, whether it's hearing children talk about self-harm or swearing or fights in the playground, things are there, and it's difficult to deal with and it's difficult to hear, especially when I don't have an answer to how to make that one better. And I guess the last...
If I may interrupt you just for a moment, if anyone else wanted to, you know, comment on how they, you know, look at measuring success. I want to give you the opportunity up here.
So I'll speak to that. So having sat on the school committee for 7 years prior to coming over the select board, I would tell you that it is, for me, you hit the nail on the head when it's child-centered on what is their experience, right? So that's one, and it's multifaceted on how you can. Some of these are subjective and some are objective, right? And the objective are easy. Those are the ones that you look at and you say, from a budget standpoint, can we fund it? Is it fundable? And the metrics that are objective are, you know, and I'm not going to get into a long conversation about MCAS, which I despise, but it's the only metric we have right now. I made a push back in 2009 to get rid of them, and it went nowhere. I'm too small of a fish in this big ocean of DESI. But so there's those metrics that we look at that says, is it functional? Is it a viable, and is it a well-rounded school? But I look at the offerings, you know, what are we offering? And can we meet the needs? And I understand that the needs have shifted and we have to balance, are we still able to meet the needs, and are we putting staff in the correct spots to be able to meet those needs? So what is a viable one? Do we have the related arts? Do we have the ability to have, you know, you hear about districts that, I think Mark had mentioned, 3 or 4 years, they had no art, no music, you know, none of those were there. We've had those ongoing for years. They have not gone away. Even when other districts looked at financially and said, we cannot, you know, this is not a new phenomena for having districts not having the funding to be able to pay, and so they make cuts. We haven't had to do this since, Mark, you mentioned 30 years. I was told the last time we ran up against a ceiling and running into this was approximately 30 years ago, early 90s. So, for 30 years, we've had a fantastic run and been able to just throw the money and we just send it there and it gets gobbled up and used every year, and we haven't really questioned. Like you said, we push back. I would still like to see those services offered, and I think I heard there was a reduction in percentage, but not elimination. Is that optimal? Absolutely not. But those are the metrics that you look at, is what are we offering? But I would agree with you, Devin, is that when the students leave there at the end of the day, are they getting the education they need? Are their needs being met? And are they satisfied with wanting to go back the next day?
Yeah.
That's a great metric. And I don't know, so I've heard from, we can cherry pick who we want to talk to and who wants to give us the information about, how much. I've had many people come up to me and say, I don't want to spend another penny, I'm on a fixed income. And we have quite a few of those. And we have parents that will come up and say, you can raise my taxes 3 times the amount that I'm paying right now and put it all towards the school, I'm all for that. It'll run the spectrum, right? So to take one and say that is the heart of what Erving is and where we should go is a little disingenuous. It's not a finite answer of what do we see as a functioning school and what do we see as a school that's thriving, offering, rigorous curriculum. I know we're putting in a new literacy program next year, and continuing to do all the arts and continuing to teach the whole child. That's what I look for. Can we do that on this budget? I hope so. I leave that up to the administration. Some of the questions were, if we're doing this to the budget, why are you doing this? And I would catch that with this board here does not make staffing changes at the school. We do not have that purview. That is the principal and the superintendent. I believe she's still on the call, and she could probably answer that one for you. The cause and effect of if this went up, why are we still cutting? I can't answer that one. The school committee made a vote to cut a certain amount of budget, and then it's up to the principal, superintendent, and special education director and the team of admin that decide where those cuts need to be made based on the request from the school committee.
And I'd be happy to see if, so people understand where the process comes from. I'm going to go slow today, so if I sound like I'm talking really slow, I apologize. That's weird echo. When the school asked the superintendent and I to find $1,000 in personnel, and to cut that, there's law that we have to follow. I can't go in and say, we have 3 special staff members, we don't really need 3, I'm going to cut one. I don't have that option. We look strictly at professional status versus non-professional status. So for those of you who don't know what that means, I'll say you're tenured or not tenured. I think people understand that. So a new teacher at 4 years of service is a non-professional staff. And according to the statute and the law that I have to follow, legal counsel is those staff that are cut for. A non-professional staff member can't stay if there is some professional staff member without licensure. So that is where we work with 2 teachers who are non-professional status, and there are other staff licensed. So if that helps people in the process a little bit more, it's not just with 2 teachers are gone, I have to follow a process with the superintendent and they go. And it comes down to professional status, non-professional status, and certificate through the state of Massachusetts.
And thank you, Lisa. And that doesn't necessarily answer your preschool question specifically, but that was exactly what Scott said was going to be mine. We can't answer those. That's the administration.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
To answer that. And
I can speak preschool, we're still looking to determine if we want number two. We've had a larger.
Sorry about that. Really sorry.
We can't understand her at all. I don't know a word she's saying back here at all.
yeah, we're
Neither can
doing
we.
our best up here.
We're trying.
It's the best we can do, unfortunately, right now.
So we're still.
We will.
I think the previous question about how she decided that the two employees to cut was around, she has a process to follow looking at professional status versus a non-professional and removing people that way. So it wasn't just she cut two teachers blindly. She followed whatever process is lined up for her, waiting for the second portion of her answer.
Yes.
So we're trying that one next.
So preschool for next year, we're still looking at enrollment numbers. The numbers are smaller in this coming class than they've been in previous years. So I'm looking at how many they're currently enrolled for our incoming 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds.
Is there the potential that the preschool will be cut completely next year?
No,
Based
I
on
don't.
enrollment?
I don't have any intention.
Okay.
No.
Well, thank
So
you.
to recap that part, we're still evaluating what the enrollment's going to be to make the decisions, it sounded like, around what the program's going to look like specifically. They'll know theoretically what the 4th graders will be, but not the 3rd. And, I'm sorry, the 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, apologies. But there's no intent to not have preschool. Is that what we all got up here?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and I last thought, but I do want to say I hope I've come across as frustrated and not angry as my intent. And thank you for your time and consideration of the questions. The last question I have is more around Mark's statement around people not feeling heard. And so I guess the question would be, when in recent history has the budget for the following year changed, or anything changed based on the opinions of the people sitting in the back of the room? Because that's what I want to know, is how do we know we're being heard? Can you cite any examples of people being heard and moving forward and showing that?
I'd like to chime in as best I can.
Thanks.
This is a difficult subject, and it always has been. Some people might think tonight that I'm totally insensitive to the plight of the school. I had children who went to the Erving Elementary School all the way through, and I supported it 100%. Whenever, even before our children went to the Erving Elementary School, when a budget would come up, my wife and I were always there, and we were always in full support of whatever the school needed, it should receive. And we voted that way. We voted that way for over 20 years. But I still hear people come to me and say, as a select board member and as a citizen, why does the school cost that much? Why can't they curtail their budget? Why can't town employees come to us and say, we can't even make what they make. We can't even get close to that. Why is it that way? Why does it continue to have to be that way? They're difficult questions. All we have control of is the budget. Tonight I heard some things that I'm actually shocked by. When you talk about how dirty the school is and the bathroom and kids not being able to use the bathroom when they want to. These are things I'm hearing for the first time, and that disturbs me. 2 nights ago, I sat and listened to a school committee meeting, and it was equally as shocked when I heard people speaking and refusing, administrators refusing to answer questions from staff and from their own staff members. and from people at large. To hear that children are being bused by a cab. I mean, I was totally shocked. Another example of that is this really upsets me. I mean, it upsets you too as well. I know it does. I'm very concerned about it as well. I'm concerned that I heard that that we weren't allowing our kids to be. This is just, it's really, really disturbing. It's very disturbing to me. I don't know how, I can see people's faces and I know they're concerned. I'm equally as concerned. And I want to see the right thing done for our students. And I don't think there's anyone in the town of Erving that doesn't want to see that. We clearly all are here for the same reasons. It's just how do we get there? And the board has said we need to talk about what's sustainable and what we can really afford. And the last thing I want to see is us pit the IP mill against the school or any other resource, because for years we've been pitting the school against other town departments on a regular basis. And now it's come to this. I don't know what the answer is, totally, but the only way we're going to get to the answer is all of us sitting here, and not just sitting here, once every decade. We need to come together as a family and as people who care about our children and people who care about our town and our community, and we need to solve our problems. And I'm going to be here, so and I know everybody else is going to be here, and I think we're all of the same mode. Is we got to fix this, and how we do that, it's going to be hard work. So I get to say.
Yeah, I was just trying to toss up an easy one about an example of when you've listened to us, but yeah, I'm glad you're emotionally invested too.
I heard the question.
So I was going to respond to that one.
And thank you, Bill.
So this would be, there was only one other time that I remember, and it was about 3 years ago, that there was pushback on an increase. The increase came in at 7%, and it was, we felt it was unattainable, and we had pushed back and asked for, between 3.5%, and I think it settled around 4% that year. There was some back and forth. I think originally we said, everybody else is getting a 2% on their budget increase. Can you get down to 2%? And so there was some back and forth. We heard that, and we made those changes. The difference with this one, as you heard, we've always had the capacity and the budget to do that. So when we've heard people, other than that one time, the voices in the back are asking for more, and we have the capacity to do it. And it's typically, there's some give and take on the budget, but ultimately the budget goes up, we send it to town floor, it gets approved. And we balance it on our end with raise and appropriation. We've had that ability. So when you say, cite an example, I would say the budget process from 2001 through 2024, it's been heard, because it hasn't been, this is the first time in my 16 years that I've been here that we've been in this position. Every year, the voices in the back are heard. And so I've been on this board now, minus a little hiatus in the middle, for 4.5 years. This is the first time, other than special town meeting, we've had more than 3 people in the room. We don't get people in the room. There are not people there. So the voices in the back, they don't exist. Not usually, and that's because the needs have been met. the voices get heard when when people feel the needs aren't met, and that's where we're at this year. So how this is going to play out, I don't know. I don't know how between now and May 10th, we've got some work to do to figure out, contingencies, alternatives. It's already been brought up that there will be an ask on the town floor, so, it would behoove all of us to look at potentials and how to address that, so we're not trying to scramble on the fly, and figure that out. Are we going to be able to scramble and do that tonight? We've been having 6 and 7 hour meetings for the last, 3 months. I would like to not have a 6 or 7 hour meeting tonight, but knowing that we are moving forward with a budget that is contested, that there will be some changes happening in the future, and we'll address those as best we can between now and May 10th, and if it's not addressed on May 10th, between now and June 30th, because we have to have it settled before we go into the new fiscal year. So one way or the other, we have to balance our budget. We can't send it forward and have it approved at the state level unbalanced. It doesn't happen. So at some point, this will come to a resolution and we'll have a balanced budget. Will everybody be satisfied? Absolutely not. There's never been a municipal government agency that can satisfy everybody all the time. So are the voices heard? I believe they are. This is the first time where it's been overwhelmingly problematic.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just say one more thing? Can we bring back the school plays? Because I loved it, and I know the community loved it. I know when I went to the plays, it was a big thing. And the kids were happy about it. My kids were happy about it. Every kid I ever saw was happy about it when it happened and it occurred. And the community came together, parents, friends, everybody came. And we need that. We need that back.
I'd love to speak to Evan before he leaves. And I greatly bring up the concerns of the bathroom, Evan, and concerns of lovely, wonderful, who's feeling sad about school. And I think it's really important for everyone who's there, and maybe you can hear my words, that our kids are reeling still. I'm not shutting down. I don't want kids to use. I have children so dysregulated they urinate on the floors and on the wall. We have kids who are counselors and the school psychologists, and I'm working with Department of Services to give support to families and children. So this is the hard work in the building are doing. We're not taking away just to take away privileges, because we're trying to help who are still and struggling from what COVID-19 stuff. So I appreciate sharing your thoughts. Your son is feeling way when I cursing at me. It's really sad. We are working collectively to meet the needs of, and this is happening all over, not just in Erving, but I just want to clarify that. We're not shutting down bathrooms. Use them. We're changing the procedure and see who the children are, so we.
I'm not going to do it justice, but I will attempt to paraphrase that.
Thanks, Jake.
I think the essence of it was the administration and the policies at school are not to take things away from students, like being able to use the bathrooms. It's to put structure and some administration around it to try to reel in and improve the situation because of the impacts that COVID has had on everyone, especially the students, and to try to do what they can to improve that. And they don't like, Lisa and the team don't like it either. Please add if you heard something different, any of you, or additional. So I just wanted to a couple things. You were asking about measuring, and I agree with what everyone has brought up, and I also think prepared for middle school, prepared for high school, well prepared for the next step, and well educated. You know, I mean, we want them all to leave successful and continue that in the next step. You asked about a time, and the only one I can think of, and I think you might have been on the school committee even, but maybe he'll remember, maybe I'm not, maybe somebody else will remember. It was maybe it was 7 or 10 years ago, and it was at annual town meeting, and we, I believe the finance committee, I think I was on the board, or maybe I was just in the audience, and it was in the early years of being here. There was contention around the school budget, and it was not supported by the finance committee. I believe that was the kind of the rub in the annual town meeting. It was very obvious. It was like, we don't support it. There was dialogue both ways. You know, there was a lot of discussion on the floor. And if I recall, the budget that was in the warrant was the one that the school committee wanted. Or the motion was made on the floor to adjust it, and it passed. I don't know by how much, but I felt like it was by a majority. And so it's not in this forum per se, but the idea that the citizens who pay for this were heard. That's the only one I can think of. And I echo what Scott said. You know, it was occasionally a bad joke, but it was just because it was so routine. We wouldn't have anyone in the audience that wasn't an employee who we needed there for years. I've been doing this for almost 8. And this is one of the largest turnouts I've ever seen at a meeting, ever. I can't think of anything but maybe a special information session that brought out attendance. And I will tease one of our front row members tonight because we're starting to have people in the front row. And it's nice. And I say that because it's good, and we want to hear this. We don't hear this if I mean, yes, people will talk to us outside of this, but in this forum, we don't hear a lot of voices. And we have to, at least myself, have to assume that that means we're doing a decent job of trying to represent and move the town forward. But to have you here to give that feedback, to give, you know, perspective, that's all we can operate under is obviously numbers, which don't tell the story, and the feedback we get. So I know this is not the reason I'd want the audience here, but I'm glad that you're coming out to voice your opinions and your standpoint. Dan, did you want to add something?
Yeah, if I could, I'll try to speak up so you can hear me. This little sign here says Finance Committee, so the main reason I'm here is finances. But the rest of these folks here indulge me because for every one of us, all this discussion is very personal. It's more than just the numbers. My daughter went through Erving Elementary School with Mark, and I wanted her to get the best education she could possibly get, and she did. And I want your kids to get the best education they can get also. I mean, there's nobody here that says, to heck with them, let's just give them a half-baked education. We want them to get the best education we possibly can. But there's more than one side to a coin. This has multiple sides. We want the fire department to put out our houses when they catch on fire. And we want the police to catch the burglars when something's happening, you know, they need to. We need to get the streets plowed. The water department's a separate of its own, but you need clean water. So we take a lot of things into consideration because we don't have an endless well of money for your kids or for anybody in town. There are people in town, as we've all heard, they don't want us to spend 5 cents on anything. They pay too much. And there are other people who want to pay as much as it takes. So somewhere in between is a balance where we can get a great education for our kids, and the kids can come home happy. I mean, my daughter didn't miss a day of school because she loved going to school. All the way to the 12th grade, you couldn't get her to miss a day of school. You want your kids to feel that way about being educated. You don't want them to feel like I did. I just wanted to get out of there as soon as I could. So, you know, like a lot of people. So, not out of Erving Elementary School, but, you know, school I went to. So I just want to let you know, we do hear you, and I think it was last week, the week before, I looked at the camera and encouraged people to encourage your friends, neighbors, family, watch this on YouTube or whatever it is, come out to the meetings and better understand. Because frustration, you mentioned the word frustration, well, we're frustrated too, that we have to we have to balance the budget, we have no choice, we can't just spend endlessly. And it's hard to do that and get what everybody needs. And there was an old guy, he's no longer with us, he said, you need to winnow down, what do you really need instead of what you want? And kids need to have a good education. It's not just we feel like they ought to have it, they should, if they need it. So whatever that's worth, we do have limited things that we can measure by. And it's not apples and oranges, it's fruit salad, because the stuff is all over the place. It's hard to compare what's the standard or average cost per student. It varies all over the place. Or what's the average MCAS test score? I don't like tests, they're just, to me, they're just, you can remember stuff better than he can, or she can, or they can at any given time. It doesn't really measure, but it's the only test we have. Another is, how many kids per classroom? I feel like Methuselah here, but every class had 30 kids, and we just got what we got. And we don't want 30 kids in every class in Erving Elementary School, but, again, what's the average? So it gives us a baseline to begin our measurements by, but we don't just take it as gospel that this is what you gotta have for cost or students per teacher, classroom, or test scores. So there's a lot of heart that goes into this budget, more than just looking at the numbers. So whatever that's worth, and I'm really glad you're here. It's amazing when you have nobody at these meetings, but then people show up at town meeting and they have no knowledge about what's going on, and all of a sudden they're trying to crucify everybody. So working together as a team, together, we can get the streets plowed and the fires put out and the criminals caught and the kids educated. We don't try to pit one against the other. That's the horrible thing to do. So, thank you. And thanks for listening to me again.
You're at the table anytime. I will just add one more, and then I'm glad to take more comment. Scott had mentioned about other schools have had to cut budget for, in other communities for a while, and we have not, fortunately, had to. And, I heard in some of the school committee meetings and some of the discussion, and from others, other communities, other states even, supplies are provided, right? Furniture is provided, all these things. Preschool is extremely inexpensive here. I believe even at the new rate, based on my my niece and nephew, and you think across the whole town, right? So all those things obviously cost money. We all know that, but recreation programs are very inexpensive. Anything goes. We have trash is basically still free. Leaf pickup happens at the curb. I mean, all these things that we all know our neighbors outside of town wish they had, and wish they didn't pay 3 times as much as we do to not have them. So I understand, but unfortunately this year we're now at that point where we can't manage all those things within the tax rate that we have today. So for what that's worth, all of those things, comprehensively, everybody in town gets to enjoy that our neighbors don't. It's all part of that puzzle, and cut snow plowing or whatever. And maybe just for reference, because we don't have the audience, and I hope you've all been watching from home, but we didn't just go and say, school committee, cut $500,000 and we'll talk then. We gave that message to all departments, the entire budget. And generally, I kind of break that $12 million up into 3 blocks. There's a third of it that's education, including secondary. There's a third of it that's the rest of government operations, general, safety, works, et cetera. And then, there's the benefits and the things, insurances and the things that we really can't do much about, right? So the rest of the town departments are $4.5 million. Education all in is $5.5. The town departments cut $500,000 as well. So I know that's a bunch of departments, but their total is equivalent to. And for some of them, if they cut, a couple $100,000, there wouldn't be a department. So just in aggregate, I want everyone to know that this is not solely us looking and saying, oh, the school should be the one to cut because they have the largest singular budget. It's by far not. So I just want everyone to realize that that's it's been a team effort to try to get here and to try to do it with the least impact possible. Thank you. Thank you for sitting in the hot seat
Yeah,
while we
thank you.
talk too. Thanks, Devin. I don't know who was first, Mackenzie, or who had their hand up first. Right. Okay, come on up. Thank you. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Stephanie Johnson. I just have a quick comment. First off, I have lived here for over 17 years, and admittedly, this is my first meeting. So I will now be a voice in the back and in the front going forward because I'm very interested in these politics. I also do not envy you whatsoever for being in this position. So my comment, I just wanted to bring up what Erving Elementary has done for my family. My daughter is in 3rd grade, so she'll be taking the MCAS this year. And she is doing extremely well. So I was a little disheartened to hear about the cuts to like the math interventionists and such and those resources. Starting this year, she was behind in math. I just received objective graphs at her last teacher conference that was given to me that shows the exponential growth she has had because she had math intervention with a small group. So I feel like these programs are incredibly important, and if you are basing your success or one of the measures off of MCAS scores, had she taken the MCAS at the beginning of the year, I apologize, if she had taken the MCAS at the beginning of the year, she would have done nowhere near as well as she's going to do, and I credit that to the help that she's had. So I understand you're working hard to work on this budget, and I really appreciate everything you're doing, but I'm looking forward to seeing how we can, come together and get it fixed a little bit better. And also the preschool, I can't speak highly enough of Sam Butinsky and the teachers that have been there because, yep. My son is a 4-year-old in her class, and the growth I've seen from him being a 3-year-old to him now is just incredible. And I'm not taking all the credit on that. That is a lot to do with school. And he always talks about his teachers and how much he loves them. So again, appreciate everything you're doing. I just wanted to come up here and, make that comment and show that I do have objective success stories from my children that prove that these programs are incredibly important. And I feel bad that my kids have been able to reap the benefits of them and others going forward won't. So thankfully I'm done having kids. So I don't have to worry about this. But, for the future of our town, really, really, we need to think about this and come together. And I'm very happy to be here and to start becoming more involved. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Mackenzie Bailey. I have terrible allergies, so I apologize for my voice. I'm also going to try and be really quick, but I just wanted to hit on a couple of points. To your point, Bill, about watching that school committee meeting, I lived that school committee meeting. And to Devin's point about being frustrated versus angry, I certainly was right on the line. Anybody who watched it, I'm sure would agree. That was very frustrating, and it is very frustrating to have an administration that is not transparent and forthcoming. It is something that the school committee is going to need to work on. I came on the school committee in November. It's been an uphill battle since November, but not one that I'm not willing to climb. So I'm hoping that we will never have to be in the situation to this degree that we are right now. The school committee was just given this budget with no real information ahead of time to try and mitigate what we were going to be faced with. And so we had the awful position to try and deal with what we were handed. So that we did the best that we could. I mean, we tried several times to just cut the bare, just cut a little bit, cut a little bit, cut a little bit, and then it became clear that we needed to cut more. So I'm hoping that anybody who's listening to this, watching this, understands that this was never the want of the school committee to have to cut such a huge amount of money. It stemmed from administration not talking to the school committee. And I'm going to be very clear, I am speaking for myself as a school committee member. I do not want to speak for the entire committee. So I want to make that very clear, that I'm speaking as a school committee member myself. No information was given ahead of time, and I hope that we can put things in place so that doesn't happen again. The other thing I would just want to talk about is the preschool program really quickly. In order for them to remove the program completely, that would be a vote of the school committee. We have not voted that, so there certainly will be a preschool program next year. Will be staffed by certified teachers, and that's also not the purview of the school committee to decide what staff member is in that position. I think that's somewhat confused by people that think that the school committee, one, decides the cuts, like where it's going to be cut, where that $200,000 was going to be cut is not up to us. In fact, I haven't been briefed at all about what the full extent of the cuts even are. I'm hearing math interventionists are being cut. I'm hearing 2 preschool teachers are being cut. I'm hearing that from the public. I'm not hearing that from the administration. So that's not anything that we had control over. We also do not have control over what teacher goes in what position. So I feel like that's really important to put out there. That's not something that the school committee has the purview over. And finally, just again, to the point about being heard, I just want to make sure that people here and at home know that, and again, I can't speak for the entire committee, but I can speak for myself to say that I have read every single email that has been sent to me, from staff advocating for their positions and others, to parents being upset over the preschool decisions and the cuts that are being made. I want them to know that they are heard. I hear them. I'm reading their emails. And I think that's something that can be, that to me is something that I'm going to work on, is making sure that people understand that I've read your information. I've heard what you had to say. We are considering it, even if in the public meeting, it's not always expressed that way. I will try and do a better job at making sure that people know that their information has been received and read, so that they do feel heard. And I would continue to, just as I think Dan said, I would encourage parents to continue to come to the school committee meetings. We have lots of dialogue. We're one of the few school committees around that are relaxed enough that we have that dialogue back and forth. Most school committees, it's people come up like this, they speak, we say they say thank you, and that's it. We've been very, very, kind of open and relaxed. And Sky, you remember that we always had this back and forth with the public, because it's important to hear those comments and suggestions and out of the box thinking for us as well as everyone else. So I encourage everybody to continue to come to the school committee meetings and continue to voice your opinions, continue to send those emails, but I would also encourage people that are upset over what's happening at the school to reach out to the principal and the superintendent. It is their jobs to make sure that the bathrooms are clean, to make sure that kids are feeling safe in the school, to make sure that staff is appropriately utilized where they need to be utilized. That is the job of the principal and the superintendent. And if that's not happening, certainly I want to hear about it, but I also encourage everyone to be reaching out to this principal and the superintendent. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
I will just say I share your frustration. I'm not an expert. We lean on Scout's knowledge, and I just call that out because of his years on the school committee. Because that is all within the purview of the school committee, we have a lot that we have to worry about, so I'm not as informed about how that all works. But watching some meetings, because of the situations we're in, I share your frustration. I would not have had the composure that the committee had at that table with some of the answers that were given by the staff. And I will just say, you know, you have my support. The chair knows this, on doing what you need to do to not have it continue that way. Not that we have any, you know, ability to do much about that, but and I will just say, you know, there was that impression when I watched those, having not knowing all of the nuance, that some of the initial meetings, it sounded like from what was being said that it was the school committee's choice on who would be cut and from where, and because those were the kind of questions you were getting from the administration. And then later it was, well, you don't have any say in that, we get to decide. So very confusing for someone who wasn't up on exactly how that all works. And you know, I can only imagine how that is for everyone watching, or everyone who has children there, or, you know, all of that. I support anything you all plan to do to improve that. Come on up. Thank you.
Again, I'm Chris Thurston. I've lived in Erving for 15 years. Taxpayer, I probably should have said this at the time that I was up here before, but I didn't. I wish I could speak as eloquently as Mark, not let my emotions get the better of me, but I have a couple thoughts. So, as far as the budget goes and the cuts, everybody keeps saying it's on the superintendent, it's on the principal, they make the decisions on who gets cut. But ultimately, the town told us that we had to cut a certain amount from the budget. The school committee then decided on the amount, as I've been going to these meetings since December. Maybe not the town meetings, but I've been going to the school committee meetings. I have a preschooler and a fifth grader. My fifth grader has IEP needs. So we say that these cuts aren't going to affect our kiddos. IEPs legally have to be met. I can tell you, I also work in a school district, I won't say where, they don't get met if we don't have staff. So yes, legally they're supposed to be met, but there's corners that are cut. Unfortunately, the programs that they were talking about with the math interventionists, you know, my kiddo went up 4 reading levels because we have an interventionist. He wouldn't be reading at grade level if that wasn't the case. I understand that you guys feel very passionate. You've expressed your concerns, but as I sit here, I get more and more and more frustrated that we keep saying that it's the administration that chooses who gets cut. Well, how fair is that to say that when you're asking for a $200,000 salary cut? Where is that supposed to come from? If we don't have preschools, my 4-year-old is ready. He's already a ready learner for reading, sorry, I'm fairly frustrated. He's going into reading groups at 4 years old. Like, that didn't happen with my 5th grader. So it's really important that we keep these programs. We already cut supplies, we already cut technology. You know, I urge you as the board to maybe sit with some community members that can give you an insight as to what's going on. You know, Bill mentioned, gosh, I didn't even know this was happening, or I didn't know that was cut, or I didn't know this. You know, we talk about the school play. The school play is a great thing, but right now, that is not on the docket when we don't have staff, when we have people that are losing their jobs. Like, I love the play as much as anyone else, but right now, that's not our focus. Our focus is to actually educate our kiddos. And then raising the preschool price, I just want to comment to that for people who are listening at home. I'll fully admit that was me at the school committee who suggested that, and then they voted on it. We do have the cheapest preschool around, but I also feel like we have the best. They have their masters. They're not just over at a facility, I won't name names, where they're paying $55 to $60 a day for, you know, a bachelor degree educator. They play an integral role. I just want to make sure that we understand when we're asking for the school to cut that much, you put them in a precarious position, like who are they supposed to cut? were mad about who they cut, but we asked them to do that. So I just want to make sure that the townspeople understand that that's where that's coming from. Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, we didn't decide where within the budget it comes from either. So we asked for the cut to balance it. If we don't cut it there, you know, I'd offer if you had suggestions on where to cut it from. You know, that's, every department had to cut, so I don't, that's just my take. There's a limited number no matter what, so if it's not in one place, it's in another. And we want to get rid of free trash, get rid of anything goes and those things. That, I mean, you can start balancing budget doing that and restore money to the school. I'm just throwing it out there, but those are the kind of things that would actually move the needle. If we cut the kind of money that we're talking about out of other departments, they wouldn't exist. So, no police, no fire, no highway, no, you know, public works. So that's just the scale of it. I know it sounds very small in one way versus our total budget, but in terms of where we can get it from, you know, and Mark, I, you know, agree in terms of what that looks like in a tax. It sounds very small, but if we have to find it within the budget we have today, it becomes very substantial, as you all feel from the school side, to the whole department, you know, the whole town in operations to try to do that. So it's not an answer, I know, and it doesn't help, but.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the no police, no fire?
So what I'm saying is for the amount of, you know, we're talking $300 and something thousand, right? That would bring the school back to where, you know, it was proposed. That is, you know, I'm gonna look at the numbers here, but I believe that is equivalent to, you know, 2/3 or more of our entire fire budget, of our entire police budget. So if we took that out, you effectively wouldn't have those departments anymore.
And that's legal?
No, I'm not suggesting we should or that I mean, there's some we can't do probably. I would need
Fire
to.
and police are not legal to do that.
Okay, but highway, public works, you know, I'm just saying the things that would come up to $300,000 that we can impact. That's my the essence of what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying we should or that it would be those. I'm just saying that anywhere else we cut $300,000 or try to find it is going to be very significant as well. Not that they're not all important, they are.
Correct.
So.
But it wouldn't be on the map to do because you couldn't do it.
Well,
You could have one part-time fire chief. Wendell had it forever.
yeah. You can,
Correct, I came from Burns Fire Department, and I was another call force, but you
Right.
couldn't just eliminate.
no.
Right.
Just for those at home, could this gentleman come up to the mic?
Yeah, because it wasn't one question.
Either, so, sorry.
You did it, Wes.
I'm Wes Platic, taxpayer, lived in Erving for the last 10 years. I'm just wondering why you're saying that if you could, or a possibility of eliminating police and fire to accommodate that 300,000? Is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
Okay.
I'm trying to point out that amount of money on what that impact on any other budget. So
Okay.
if that doesn't come from the school budget, then it comes out of some other budget within the town.
Right.
And the places that we could take 300 out of, most of those budgets are less than 300 in total, or it would be more than half of their budget.
Okay.
And so that impact to the community would be significant.
Okay. I was going to say.
That's all. Not saying we should or shouldn't, or those are the right places. I'm just saying those are, it's like a balloon. If we push it on one side, you know, it's got to come out somewhere. So that's my point.
Right.
If
I'm
that
going
makes
to say too
sense.
is, I do have 3 sons in Erving Elementary. One in 6th grade, one in 4th grade, and one in preschool. And it is my preschooler. He loves to come home every day and talk about his teachers. He loves his teachers, and that's the whole reason he goes back to school. From how much he learns, just from them and what the school curriculum is. But a big part is, not to leave any of his other teachers out, but Miss Butinsky, he's his whole life. Everything about her, he just loves. Everything from the morning till night, anything on the weekends, when do I go back to see her? Can we call her and talk to her? I just gotta say, she is a huge part of my son's life, and along with the other teachers with my son's lives too. Even my 4-year-old, he's special needs. He has Down syndrome. We've seen a drastic cut in his ability to do things there, only because he had quite a few special needs teachers for him and one-on-ones. We went from this year from 3 to 1. And I'm not saying it's the school committee's fault. We had some come in and just some leave, just not wanting to be there. And then for my 6th grader, to talk upon the bathroom incident, we only get what our children are telling us from what they receive and how they feel about the school. And when my student says that somebody has urinated in the bathroom or drawn bad things in the bathroom, so now I was told by my son in 6th grade that the bathroom be inspected before he entered. And then as he entered alone, and then as he came out, it would be re-inspected to make sure he wasn't the one defacing property. I mean, that's drastic. I mean, this is really drastic, and I understand that this has nothing to do with you, but it's just me speaking that it really took a toll on him, and I just want our kids to just love being at school, and we should always have at Erving, because Erving is a loving and very committed school to teaching our kids and at its almost best. So I thank you again for hearing us, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. This is not easy stuff. I appreciate hearing it because we won't hear it either necessarily. So, any further questions or comments before we continue on tonight, specific to this? Okay.
Can I just mention one thing?
Yep.
I just want to mention one thing. I don't think it was mentioned. When we started the budget process, we were right in the vicinity of $1 million underfunded.
1.7.
1.7? Okay.
To where we are now, yeah.
Okay, so
Effectively.
it's just so that, put it in context. Wasn't just, we're all going to go along happily and just tell the school to fix everything. There was 1.7 million, we were out of balance. And so we've worked on that in a variety of ways to get it back in balance. We're not just trying to saddle everything onto the school.
And I just, for those that might have seen numbers earlier and why I'm saying that, and it's a ballpark. It's just because we had the net result was about $1 million, but that wasn't funding operations from raise and appropriate. It was funding them from free cash. So with the shifts we made to actually fund the operations out of the raise and appropriate that's sustainable, it would have increased that deficit that much, or a significant amount. Like you were going to say something?
I was going to say something. I had mentioned earlier, I don't think we're in a position this evening to start looking at crafting any Prop 2.5 override language and what that looks like. But it would be, I was running some numbers, and I would like to, I know, Mark, thank you for giving the rough estimates, but I would like to see what those numbers are, a little more finite. Per 100,000 on what that cost would be. And I think Jackie's still in the audience. I'm going to lean on you, Ms. Boyden. If we could run some numbers on what that would look like in $100,000 increments on the 65% shift for the entire, not just the households, but the full budget. And to Dan's point, and Jake, I wouldn't feel comfortable if an override was requested and that moved forward, to say that it would be an override for $333,000, I think would be a little narrow-sighted in saying that we're only going to ask an override to put it back into the school. To that point, we had other departments, we had an entire program that was set to start that was then dismantled out of the police department, and it's no longer going to happen, which would stabilize some of the drastic shifts they've had. As we know, at one point, they were down to 3 staff members, trying to fill 24-hour positions 7 days a week, which was unwielding. So we've seen these type of things. So if we are to be looking at a floor amendment and a request for a Prop 2.5 override, I would be looking at saying the entire budget needs to be looked at for that same Prop 2.5 override, and that there are certain pieces from each of those other departments that we had this same conversation with about saying, you need to cut that, you need to cut that, you need to cut that, because we had to balance the budget. So, Jackie, I would ask if it's not too much trouble, looking at everything from $100,000 to $800,000 in increments of $100,000, what that would look like per, and you could just do it in that, and people know what their approximate value is of their home. They can figure out if their home is $250,000, then it's the $100,000 rate times 2.5, so we can figure that out. But just what the overall impact would be for those.
Mark?
Thanks again. I like Scott's idea. My concern would be that the folks that are here are advocating for the school budget. That's why they're all here. They're not all here for whatever else it may be. I would agree with you. I've never wanted to pit department against department. I think that is bad communication, bad management. Even when the staff, teaching staff was looking for raises, we did not want to pit against others. We pointed out other amounts that were increased, but we did, and we were happy for them. But we don't want to pit anybody against anybody else. My concern would be, even though I agree with your idea, Scott, I would be concerned that if it gets too big and then folks don't pass the override because too many things have been dumped on top of it, I just want to make sure you understand we're advocating for the school for sure. That's why we're here. And thanks again.
Thanks. I agree, Scott. I think we should still have the data, and we should still go back to our departments and understand what was the kind of most critical item, reasonably that they dropped that, might be worth considering. Unfortunately, you all heard tonight and may have heard in other meetings, being able to make any kind of wage adjustment for all of the non-union, non-school, non-contract staff is extremely constrained for the same reasons. And our staff does a great job across every department and all throughout town. And so that one for me is a difficult one. He spoke about the police program, and I agree there too. But we also need to recognize and appreciate everyone that makes the town what it is for us. So that would be one for me on the list too. We haven't come to what we'd like to do, and maybe we should be also talking about what that would be versus what we have the capacity to do today. That's my thoughts for that. Did you want to add one more thing?
I just did one
Come on. And then we're going to
very short.
Continue.
But I've just been one that says, no matter the cuts in the fire department or the public works or the police department or any staff members, I just do want to thank everybody that keeps us safe, the fire department, the police department, public works for keeping our roads plowed, picking up our leaves, doing, everything goes for the town. I do appreciate it because I got to say that 10 years in this town has been 10 spectacular years. I love this town. This town is really is giving me a whole new hope to a great town, and not that it wasn't before, but for me, I came from somewhere else. But I really do enjoy this town and everybody that makes it safe and humble for everyone around us. But thank you very much.
Thank you. And I agree. And I did not grow up here either, so I came in and have enjoyed the same. at this point, in terms of FY '24 proposed budget, obviously, we're not in a position to do anything different tonight. Are we all accepting that this is what it is for tonight? To put on the ATM? Changes obviously can happen there, but at this point, this is what we have, and we need to get to the printers, finalized into the printers to be able to make the meeting, which is set in by law, not by us, so we can't change it that easily. It's much more complicated, timing-wise.
Yes. So that's why I said in the beginning, I think, having this budget where it is, hearing this information, knowing that there is a push to amend on the floor, but in order to get this budget out to the residents in time, print it, send it out, but we have a few meetings before May 10th, 2, I believe, right, 24th, or we're holding one, or is that just informational? No, we'll have one that evening as well.
The 24th?
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, so we have a couple of meetings to look at contingencies, look at alternatives for where we go. I've asked the assessor's office to look at, finding the actual numbers so we can have that for the 24th and have that discussion. And we go forward with there.
Finance Committee? Bill? Same? Okay. Okay, so this is what is incorporated in the draft annual town meeting warrant. So if there's no more questions on that budget summary, I'm going to move into the warrant. So we have the FY '24, or the annual town meeting warrant here for Wednesday, May 10th. There are a few changes from our last meeting. Just want to clarify something from our last meeting with regards to elected officials. The question was posed, and without reviewing the footage and seeing exactly what was said, just want to make sure, in essence, it was what I believe it was. The motion that was made, recommendation, and passed by the FinCom was to not make any changes to the stipended elected officials' compensation, correct? As opposed to all elected officials, and the nuance is just that we have elected officials who work day to day in the office and are paid off the wage tables, and our elected officials, they're not stipended. So just want to make sure I'm clear that that was only referring to stipended positions, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I believe I made the motion.
Just for the record, you may have said that, but
No,
in
you're
retrospect.
exactly right. It was not intended to stop the pay of people who are regular, salaried elected officials.
Okay.
Just the people who are elected and get we'll call it a stipend. A few hundred, few thousand, it's not their main job.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Looking through the draft warrant here. There was some grammatical and wording things that we identified, and a lot of those have been corrected.
Mm-hmm.
The Article 5, the FY '24 general operating budget, is set based upon the budget summary we just looked at. So those are all the numbers in red. The elected officials' compensation here is set based on no change at this time. We will have to revisit that to set a wage change for the regular elected officials that are also employees.
Right.
That work in office, on a regular basis, because we will not be able to make wage adjustments without another meeting to set that.
Correct.
For them. Article 7, the FY '24 Erving Elementary School funding is set based on the last school committee approved budget.
As to the school funding, do we have an update on anything with the vans or any of the transportation? Because I know there was some talk that if there was excess funding in that line, it could go back, towards the budget. So do we know where we are in that process?
I guess we might. Come on up, thank you. I almost didn't see you in the very back of the room. I don't have to look that far normally, it's like right in the front row.
Yes, there's not much of an update, but Brian, myself, and Karina are working on getting those figures. So Karina has compiled a folder, so we are working on creating an RFP to be able to go out to bid for those services.
Okay. And that's in terms of a transportation contract?
Yep,
To try to
contract,
hopefully
but
get a
also
competitive.
investigating a purchase of a van too, so weighing the costs of both those two situations.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. If there's any articles as we go through here that you have questions, please raise them. On to 11, that's set. And I believe the highlight is there was a small typo in one of the values, so it's been adjusted and corrected in there. Article 12, this was adjusted for the around town amount, just to make sure that the numbers and words align. Article 13 is the add for the appropriation for wage and compensation adjustments. So this is the $60,000 set aside so that we can make wage and compensation adjustments once we come to that point, that decision. Article 14 was updated with an account number. Article 16, the revolving account spending limits, the request to increase the spending limit for the Board of Library Trustees library use and fees was adjusted to $10,000. You'll see it, I believe it's the last article that was added as well. That has to be an additional bylaw change to increase that limit. So they'll have to both be passed for that. Article 18, the opioid settlement stabilization fund and dedication of revenue was updated with our current balance of $22,716.85 that we've received so far to be transferred in at that time. Article 20 was adjusted to the specific split between free cash and raise and appropriate as shown on the budget sheet, budget summary. Article 22, some updated language noting as part of the town code. Yes, sir.
Before we move on, just kind of a quick review. It looks to me like Articles 22, which you just got to, 23, 24, 25, and 26, do they have a financial component? They all say the Finance Committee recommends. I don't know if they have any financial impact or component. If they don't, then perhaps the Finance, I don't know if the Finance Committee wants to recommend them or stay neutral, what you might want to do.
I believe we usually do not.
We usually don't if it has nothing to do with finance, but doesn't mean we don't recommend it. Just kind of leave it blank.
You would be correct that, basically they don't have any significant financial impact or none at all. So if you would like to just have us remove the recommends line entirely and not take a vote at all, we can do that.
I think.
Is that the consensus? It sounds like it. Okay, we can remove,
If you or Brian should find there is a financial aspect to them, we'll certainly, I don't think there is.
I mean, there might be a ban fee for someone who parks, and I mean, that's not, but they're immaterial. There's no material, I don't believe any material, a financial impact of 22 through 27 in the way the finance committee would normally weigh in on something.
I left out 27 on my discussion because I didn't want to have any conflict with the library stuff, so we'll go on with that one.
Again, in your role, I think, as we talked about last meeting, it doesn't impact you financially, so either way. So we'll strike the finance committee recommends from those articles 22 through 27.
Thank you.
Article 24, the personnel bylaw. Question on 3C, section 1B3C. Section 1B3C. Yeah, there we go. And then it references section 14 as a yes.
I can maybe answer a question on that.
There'll probably be questions, but yeah, that haven't been asked yet. If you want to come up, Dick, please. The reference or the reason for it is, I believe, and you can probably fill in more detail, the idea that those who serve on the personnel board are noted currently not to be employees or who regularly, serve in any other elected or appointed capacity. But if the board was in effect the personnel board, we are paid, we serve in a different capacity, et cetera, or we have a stipend. So I think that there's a conflict question there, is it?
Yeah, I was concerned about the way it was written, that anybody that's a town employee, can't be on the personnel board. That's, and I believe Leslie Brown used to be, I don't know if she even still is on the board, to be honest with you, but she was on that board. But she's also the warden for the polls, so that makes her an employee. And she's really valuable to me there, as she may well be on the board as well. And so I was concerned about that conflict. And that's why I raised the issue with Brian when he asked to proofread. That was one issue. The other issue I had was, do you really want to have that compensation table as part of the bylaw? Because then you got to do a bylaw change every time you want to change it. So I suggested that maybe that be rewritten.
No, and so that language in section 3, I think it was.
And there was another section that went along with it that included an attachment.
The 1B3C, the first one you're talking about, right?
It's it's not 3C. It's actually just section 1C. So there's A, B, and C. B has 3 parts, but it's.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
It's
1C. I see.
It's 1C.
The page break through me.
It was there, and there was another location where there was a table that was actually going to be included as an attachment to the bylaw.
Yeah, prior to, so this hasn't been looked at for months. I would agree that it should be pulled out. We've talked about several times that if there are tables that are frequently amended and changed through either town vote or votes of the select board, that they should not be embedded in a bylaw, which requires a town meeting to do that. So, this just states that it can, but it's a moot point. It's unnecessary language.
Yep, fair enough.
So we are agreeing that we would strike.
Yeah, I would
1C?
just strike C and then you'll change D and E to C and D. Just
We'll just re-letter.
Re-letter them, yeah. And as far as the next one, section 4, the second paragraph,
I mean, I think it contradicts the last sentence in the same paragraph. If we followed that, the select board could not serve. Technically.
Yeah, I mean, it just says in the absence, the select board shall serve, and we're employees as well. So how can we serve?
We would
So
violate
it's a-
the first sentence to do the last sentence.
Yeah.
So, Bill, any concerns with either of those, striking them both?
No concern whatsoever. I would strike.
So I think just at the comma, after registered voter, just putting a period and
striking them.
leaving it there and striking the rest of that sentence.
Yep.
I'm fine with that.
And then it's section 14 that you were referring to as the table reference. So there's attached here to an Exhibit A is and the proposed change to the select board will adopt and maintain. Not attached as an exhibit. And then notes at the end, said plan will be on file. Any concerns with that amendment?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Good.
I think so, but you're probably going to have questions on me in the next one.
Okay.
Well, so I was just looking, talking about the
Oh, yes, the meeting
minutes.
minutes,
The
yeah,
minutes
yeah.
bylaw,
So
yeah.
there was the title change, which I was fine with. It's about requirements, and I was actually reading the recommended striking of sections 6 and 7 because they're not directly related to minutes.
Yeah, and
So-
that's what, I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
what I did when I, because I never create anything in a vacuum, so I took what other towns had done, and I just wasn't really thinking about, well, this isn't directly related to minutes per
Right.
se, yeah.
And they should live somewhere else at some point. We can add them in, but just not in this bylaw related to
Yeah.
meeting minute requirements.
Yeah, there was, Brian and I spoke about this one today and kind of came up with that as a short term. Because longer term, I think all of us have often talked about needing a better criteria around what is required from being part of a board, committee, or commission. And so crafting that, and I had found some good language from another town as a title, and I can't remember what it was now, but it was basically like, just requirements around meetings in general and overall, being part of. And that's more what these last pieces start to be part
Right.
of. So
Yep.
I think this could become part of a different bylaw in the future that encompasses it all, if that's the way we wish to go.
Yeah, operational of,
Yeah, it's like operating of meetings or something. Yeah, it wasn't quite, something like that. It was much more eloquent than I can come up with right now at 9:30. Thank you, Dick. Are both of you good with the edits?
Yes.
Okay.
And 27 is just the requirement based on the change from 3 to 10,000, correct?
Correct.
Although it has to be in there every year anyways, doesn't it?
You talking about the bylaw, or are you talking about the revolving limit?
No, 27 is for the revolving funds.
Yes.
Chapter 44, subsection 53 and a half, E and a half.
Yep.
So the bylaw only has to be changed now as long as we don't change the limits. Then only the limits article has to be there.
Got it.
Which is silly because they're referencing the same thing and you can't change one without changing the other, I think, ever. So effectively, if you ever change, you have to have both. If you don't change, you have to have one.
Yep.
If you change the revolving limits, you have to have the 2 articles. If you don't change them, you have to have the 1 article every year.
Every year.
It is what it is. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's.
Yes, this is how it has to be legally because of the change from 3 to 10.
Correct.
1,000, yeah.
Thank you.
So it's 2-part.
Can I just comment? I think, I'm going backwards just for a second. The idea about the not being employees on the personnel board, I'm comfortable with it because the select board appoints the personnel committee. But I think that at the time, long ago, the discussion was you would not want to have your employees making their own personnel policy. Who knows what they do? But I'm comfortable, select board appoints them. You're not going to commandeer the personnel board. So I'm comfortable the way it is, but wanted to comment that why it was there to begin with, I think.
I think if we had, my opinion, if we had an outpouring of interested citizens to be on committees and boards, and especially this one, I would be glad to keep it, that it was not an employee and that we couldn't do it. But
Fine.
effectively, we have had to serve in lieu of interested enough members, so I think it just, yeah.
I'm fine with it how it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I just noted a typo in Article 25's title. We'll get that fixed as well, just for the record, if we're going to adopt as amended tonight.
So I just want to, one last thing on that, Dan. It's a recommending board without the authority to make changes. So it's, I understand your concern of you get a personnel board with 3 or 5 members that are all employees that say, strike all of that. We don't like any of that. Get rid of it all. It's a recommending board with no authority to enact change. They just recommend to the select board, which we would then bring it to the voters.
Absolutely right.
So,
Thank you.
You are welcome. I believe that is it for changes and adjustments to the ATM versus the last meeting. Any further questions or comments on the ATM draft? Would the Finance Committee like to make recommendations?
I'm assuming you're going to do it in totality.
I think that was what I heard earlier meetings, right? That you would all be doing it in batch?
I'm not going to comment on certain articles. So let's see.
I think it was 22.
So is there a motion from the Finance Committee to approve Articles 1 through 21?
Recommend.
Recommend.
To recommend? No, that was my question, if we had a motion.
I think Dan so moved, actually.
Yeah,
It was
Dan
quite
so
a-
moved. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And that was as amended, correct?
Correct, as amended.
Thank you. How about the board? Is there a motion to approve as, to adopt, I think, actually, technically?
Yeah, I think it's.
As, adopt as amended.
Make a motion to adopt the annual town meeting warrant dated Wednesday, May 10th, 2023, to be held at the Erving Elementary School, 7 p.m. as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. For the Finance Committee, who were not here earlier in the Select Board portion, the River Road water main break that we had a couple weekends ago, we've gotten the emergency authorizations and we'll be finishing up that work this week to bring it back to original conditions. This late in the fiscal year, we're going to wait until May, June, as we wrap up finances for the year and see if we had the capacity to cover that within the budget, because we did not have any other significant emergencies that we're aware of in wastewater, in water this fiscal year. But should we not have that capacity, we'd be coming back with a reserve fund transfer request for that. And the amount of the repairs of outside costs, non-town costs, were not to exceed $12,500. So well within the capacity of the reserve fund. I don't believe we've taken anything out this year yet.
Nothing.
So just on the horizon, we'll let you know if we do need to go that route, but wanted to make you aware. I hope we will see you all on the 24th at the IP mill discussion. We will have the various 6 different scenarios data before that meeting. So is there interest in meeting ahead of time to discuss them, or go into it at 7? And
We're not going to meet before then, are we?
that's my question.
I'd say if we're not going to meet before then maybe we should meet for a couple minutes ahead of time, just in case something else has come up.
Or if we have any questions about any of the scenarios.
6 o'clock.
Works for me.
So what I'll propose is we'll put it on the agenda as a joint for capital, finance, and the board at 6. We'll let capital know as well. Obviously not here tonight except a few of us. If they're not there, they're not there. But we'll have that opportunity or availability to them as well.
Okay.
So we can discuss those maybe 6 to 6:30 and then go into then break to go in for 7.
Right.
And then we'll plan to resume after, hopefully very short business, but if there's any other business we don't cover before. Anything else before we wrap up?
No.
No?
Oh, yes, sir. Come on up.
Dan Watson from 15 North Street. What is the goal for the budget for '24? What number are you looking for?
For the total?
The total.
We're there.
I mean, we've maxed out pretty much the available funds, both. All of the raise and appropriate pretty much. So out of raise and appropriate, the amount was $113,372, and then $639,000 out of free cash. I didn't put that together, but it's just about, just under $13,800,000 total.
And what increase is that from last year?
On the raise and appropriate side, it's basically 2.4999999. And on the free cash side, it's pretty similar. We spent about $610,000 free cash last year, so we're proposing $639,000.
Can I back
excluding the special town meeting that we had that expended some separate money.
Can I back up to the school real quick? What is the, what number did you ask them to get to?
We didn't set a target number. We asked them to try to cut it by 350,000.
350 from what?
At that time, there's been a few proposals, so I'm going to say I believe it was the 3.844.
Okay, thank you.
Believe.
At that time, yeah.
All right,
And
thanks.
yeah.
And the 350,000 was still an increase from the previous year.
If they had cut that, it still would have been an increase in the previous year.
And to recognize they cut 300 something, not 350, but it was 300, north of 300. So
Was that 350 a total? Because didn't
Yeah.
they cut about 85,000 before?
Yeah, their total cut would be a little over $330,000, inclusive of everything that was cut from the 3 different versions. There was an initial cut of about 65, another cut of about 22, and then the final cut of 230. So do that,
Okay.
whatever that math
Okay.
is.
yeah, there were some scenarios that didn't get presented to us that they had discussed before
Correct.
that I think were even higher, but that
Yeah.
was not after it was proposed to us.
To me, I think Charlie made an important point, I think. If I understand it right, that the cuts we've asked for, it still results in an increase in the school budget over last year, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct. The school budget increase is still
209.
$209,000
Okay.
year over year.
Okay, so the budget that's being proposed now would give them a couple $100,000 more than they had last year?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the concerns that were voiced were that the increased costs of out of district exceed the $209,000 increase in budget. So the feel on the other portions of it were, you had to cut elsewhere to compensate for that. So that's the give and take within that budget.
Okay, thank you.
It's about 6.3% increase now.
Currently.
Originally, I think the request was around 15.5, 16.
Their initial one was 18. Very initial, the very first
Okay.
one.
Did the one that came to us or the first one they looked
The
at?
first one that they looked at
That's
was
what I
18.
thought. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
a lot of work from 18 to 6. I mean,
Yeah.
Gotta acknowledge that for sure. Any other questions before we close? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.